She reached for his hand before the cameras even found her. Not a casual touch, not a polite gesture, a grip. And in that single moment, before a single word was spoken, Meghan Markle told the world everything. But here's the thing. Most people missed it. Body language doesn't lie. It can't. While the mind carefully constructs the perfect smile, the perfect wave, the perfect statement for the press, the body operates on a different frequency entirely. It whispers what the voice refuses to say. And during Meghan and Harry's time in Australia, those whispers were almost deafening, if you knew how to listen. Today, we're going to listen. We're going to slow everything down. We're going to look at the moments that passed in seconds, but carried the weight of years. And by the end of this, you're going to see this couple and this chapter of their story in a way you never have before. So let's start at the very beginning, because the first 10 seconds of their Australian appearance told an entire story on their own. The year was 2018. Harry and Meghan had been married just 5 months. The ink on the wedding invitations had barely faded. And yet, stepping onto Australian soil, there was something in Meghan's posture that experts would later describe as quietly extraordinary. She wasn't nervous in the way a new royal bride might be expected to be nervous. She was anchored. And the anchor was Harry. Watch the footage closely. As they descend from the plane, Meghan's left hand finds Harry's arm before her right foot finds the tarmac. That's not coincidence, that's instinct. Body language specialists call this a security touch, a physical tethering to a source of comfort in an unfamiliar environment. In ordinary couples, it goes unnoticed. In one of the most watched couples on Earth, it becomes a statement. But here's where things get interesting. Harry doesn't pull away, he doesn't stiffen, he doesn't do what many public figures instinctively do when touched unexpectedly in a formal setting, that barely perceptible micro-withdrawal that says, "Not now, we're being watched." Instead, he leans in, almost imperceptibly. Almost. If you blink, you miss it, but it's there. A half-inch shift toward her, a silent answer to her silent question. "I'm here. I've got you." And that dynamic, Meghan reaching, Harry anchoring, would play out again and again across 19 days and 16 locations, sometimes in grand public moments, sometimes in quiet flickers between engagements, always telling the same story. But what story exactly? That's what we need to examine, because warmth and closeness in body language don't always mean what we assume they mean. Sometimes they signal joy, sometimes they signal anxiety. Sometimes, and this is where it gets complicated, they signal both at once. Let's talk about the tour itself for a moment, because context is everything when reading body language. Harry and Meghan arrived in Australia with an announcement that changed the temperature of every room they entered. Meghan was pregnant. The palace had confirmed it that morning. The world was watching with a particular kind of intensity, not just the usual royal scrutiny, but something warmer, more invested. The public wanted this to work, wanted them to work. And on the surface, it looked like it absolutely was. The smiles were radiant, the crowd interactions were genuine. You can tell because the smile reached their eyes, what psychologists call a Duchenne smile, the kind your face makes involuntarily when the joy is real. Meghan crouched down to speak to children at eye level. Harry laughed, not the polished, camera-ready laugh of obligation, but the sudden, unguarded kind that catches even the laugher off guard. These were not performances, at least not entirely. But here's where things get strange. Amid all that warmth, amid all that apparent ease, there were moments, brief, blink and you'll miss them moments, where something else flickered across Meghan's face. Not unhappiness, not exactly, more like awareness, a sudden sharp consciousness of being watched, of being evaluated, of being in the middle of something much larger and much more complicated than a royal tour of a beautiful country. Watch the footage from the Sydney Opera House arrival. Meghan is smiling, waving, doing everything right. And then a photographer calls her name, just her name, not Harry's. For approximately 1.5 seconds, her smile doesn't change, but her eyes do. They sharpen, they scan. It's the look of someone taking a reading of the room, calculating in the most human sense of the word. Body language experts describe this as a social recalibration, a moment where the subconscious mind pauses to reassess the environment. In high-pressure public figures, it's extraordinarily common. What's remarkable here isn't that it happened, it's how quickly she recovered. Within 2 seconds, the warmth was back. Full, seemingly effortless, completely convincing. That kind of recovery requires either extraordinary training or extraordinary resilience, quite possibly both. Now, let's talk about Harry, because in the analysis of this tour, Harry's body language is often treated as secondary, a supporting role to Meghan's leading performance. But that reading misses something crucial. Watch Harry when he thinks no one's watching Meghan, not when he's beside her, not when he's engaging with the crowd. Watch him in the transitional moments, stepping out of a vehicle, waiting for an event to begin, walking slightly behind her as she greets a dignitary. In those seconds, Harry's face does something remarkable. It softens completely. The composed, trained royal expression he wears in front of the cameras gives way to something that looks startlingly like wonder. He watches her, not with the polite attention of a spouse supporting their partner, with genuine absorbed attention, like he's still, 5 months into marriage, slightly astonished that she's there. Relationship psychologists sometimes call this the witness effect, one partner instinctively watching the other as if bearing witness to something they consider extraordinary. It's most commonly observed in new relationships, but it can persist in couples who maintain genuine admiration for each other across years, even decades. In Harry's case, it's consistent throughout the entire tour. Every time Meghan is engaged with someone else, every time the spotlight moves away from him, he watches her, quietly, completely. And that matters because here's what it tells us. Whatever pressures existed, and we know now with the benefit of hindsight that there were pressures, in these moments in Australia in October 2018, Harry was not performing his marriage, he was living it. But let's not romanticize this too completely, because when you look closely enough, you also see the cracks. Not in the relationship, that's not what we're examining, but in the experience, in what it was costing both of them to be there, to be that, day after day. There's a particular moment on day 7 of the tour that body language analysts have pointed to repeatedly. It was a walkabout, a public greeting where Harry and Meghan moved along a crowd barrier, shaking hands, accepting flowers, absorbing the extraordinary energy of thousands who'd waited hours for 30 seconds of proximity to them. Watch Meghan's hands during this sequence. Not the gestures, not the waves or the handshakes. Watch what their hands do between interactions. The slight press of fingers against her palm, the almost invisible curl and release. These are self-soothing behaviors, technically called pacifying behaviors by body language researchers, and they appear when the nervous system is working hard to manage stimulation or stress. This isn't a criticism, it's the opposite. It's evidence of someone operating at full capacity, giving everything they have to every person in front of them, and managing the internal cost of that with the tools available. It's the body doing its job. What's significant is what's happening simultaneously on the other side of the crowd barrier. Harry is doing the same thing. Not identically, his version is a brief, repeated touch of his jacket lapel, which performs a similar self-regulating function, but the timing is almost synchronized, as if they're not just sharing the experience, they're sharing the weight of it. 2 people carrying the same thing in the same way at the same moment, without exchanging the word. That kind of synchronization, called behavioral mirroring at a physiological level, typically develops over years in close relationships. 5 months in, it was already there. Now, we have to talk about the moment that defined the tour's body language story, the moment that, when you see it once, you cannot unsee. It happened in Fiji, a formal dinner. Meghan in a deep blue gown, Harry in a dark suit, both navigating the particular complexity of high-protocol royal engagements, where every placement, every gesture, every interaction is observed and cataloged by people who've been doing this their entire professional lives. Midway through the evening, there's a photograph, a single frame captured by a press photographer who almost certainly didn't realize what they'd caught. Meghan and Harry are standing side by side, facing slightly away from each other, engaged with different guests. In every visible metric, they are performing their roles flawlessly. And yet, below the frame of formal public attention, their hands, their right hands, have found each other. Not fully interlaced, not the bold statement handhold of the walkabouts. A lighter connection, little finger to little finger, the smallest possible point of contact. Body language specialists have described this image as one of the most intimate photographs of the entire tour, not because of what it shows, but because of what it reveals. A private gesture maintained in public. A thread between two people who are, in that moment, technically apart, but functionally together. It's the kind of touch that doesn't happen because someone decided to do it. It happens because the hand reaches without asking permission, because on some level below conscious thought, the message being sent is simply, still here, still here. What does all of this tell us, taken together? Here's my read, and I want to be clear, this is analysis, not certainty. Body language is a language, and like all languages, it can be misread. But what the footage from Australia suggests is a couple in a genuine, deeply invested relationship, navigating something genuinely difficult. The warmth is real, the connection is real, the stress is also real. And what's perhaps most striking is that the stress doesn't weaken the connection. If anything, the evidence suggests it strengthens it. Every time the pressure increases, they move toward each other, physically, instinctively, consistently. There's a concept in psychology called secure attachment under stress, the tendency of securely bonded individuals to seek proximity to their attachment figure when threatened or overwhelmed, rather than withdrawing. In adult relationships, it's considered one of the most reliable indicators of genuine emotional security between two people. In Australia, in 2018, across 19 days and 16 locations, that pattern plays out with striking consistency. She reaches, he anchors. He watches, she recovers. They find each other in rooms full of people, across distances of 3 feet and 3,000 miles of protocol. And here's what I want to leave you with. We live in an era of extreme scrutiny of public figures, particularly this couple, perhaps more than any other in living memory. Enormous energy is spent analyzing what they say, what they decide, what they represent. The noise is constant, the opinions are fierce, the narrative shifts weekly. But the body doesn't follow the narrative. The body doesn't read the headlines. The body just responds. And in Australia, in those unguarded half-seconds between moments, in the synchronized self-soothing and the little finger connections and the way Harry's face went soft when he thought no one was looking, the body told a story that had nothing to do with palaces or press releases or the vast machinery of royal life. It told a story of two people, newly married, newly expectant, in a foreign country under relentless observation, finding each other in the only way that was entirely theirs. It told a human story, and sometimes that's the most revealing thing of all. If you've ever found yourself reading someone's body language and wondering what they were really feeling, drop it in the comments. I read everyone. And if this kind of deep dive analysis is something you want to see more of, you know what to do.